convention.
I started.
So how did you get involved?
I want this photo, actually. How did I get involved with iZombie? It was pilot season and I was looking at various pilots. My manager sent me this thing, iZombie, and I assumed just with the title it would be sort of along the lines of Walking Dead, and which I think is a great show. But it was a big surprise when I got home and read it, and it's this sort of bizarre zombie comedy procedural. It jams in as many genres as we can, and they have a lot of fun with it. They subvert the ideas of the zombie genre quite a lot. So I went in and tested. I Skyped with Rob, who was at his mum's 70th birthday in Austin, and we just hit it off, and it all fell into place.
So Rob talked about how the character goes through a pretty dramatic arc in the first episode, and it's kind of losing a quarter-life crisis, losing everything that she's got, and having to reinvent herself. So, that can make a very bitter character, to play, but obviously Rob knows how to really bring out the comedy in those types of situations.
Absolutely. I think, I've always been drawn to comedy with a strong sense of tragedy and vice versa, and I think that's smart writing, and Rob and Diane do a great job with that. But I think that was what was appealing about Liv, is she is cynical and jaded, and she's lost her sense of identity, but within the first episode, although she can maintain some of that sarcasm and that sort of dark sense of humour, she starts to see a sense of purpose as well, and thanks to Ravi, her colleague and boss, she's able to find a bit more of a purpose in her life, and with that growing sense of identity comes a little bit more of a sense of optimism too.
How's the mythology of how you have to look, and how you have to, if we're thinking in extremes of Walking Dead and, dissertation, you have to be a pure zombie, and you have to be a functional, person in the world, so, how do you kind of stay human and at the same time doing kind of instill those new features that Liv has got for life?
Right.
Change.
Well, Rob Buckley coined the phrase "sylph," which we're playing with. Use your imaginations. But so we're playing that she's able to pass off as a human. She has to be. Her family and friends still believe that she's a human.
Okay.
But she's unhealthy looking, and weirdly, I actually saw somebody walking around the streets who had a similar complexion, and I double took because although I may have just thought she was unhealthy before, now I'm getting suspicious. So I lose all my pigment, and I have white hair. I have very, very white skin. I have dark circles under my eyes, and the more hungry I am, and the longer it's been since I've eaten a brain, I get redder contact lenses, and I get veins. And we work with an amazing makeup and hair department that have created a really strong look for when I go rabid zombie.
Can you talk about the relationship between your character, kind of good zombie versus bad zombie?
Absolutely. I only recently watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I feel like my character in some ways is a cross between Buffy and Angel. She's this ethical zombie. She's the heroine, and she is solving these crimes and fighting against injustice in her community, but she is also a zombie who is trying to eat brains in the most socially responsible way. So she eats the brains of people who've died already in order to try to preserve some dignity, I guess.
I had actually we heard there was a bad zombie in this.
Right. So for every good zombie, I guess our villain, it just serves very well for us to have a bad zombie whose intentions aren't so ethical or socially responsible. So we have cast the divine David Anders as Blaine De Beers, and he is sort of the peak of the bad zombie world, and we get to see Liv and his interaction, and that's like a big part of the storyline for the first season, especially. No problem.
You've been in so many big shows, you've had a big couple of years and done some amazing projects. This you're like fronting it and you're the one on the Comic-Con bag. Is it a bit daunting? Is it challenging to be the face of the show?
I don't think so. I think actually I just look around at the cast that I'm working with, and they're all stand-up comics. They're so funny. Like, we sit in this panel and they're so endearing. I think they all have really challenging roles that they're focused on, and I kind of just want my character's dynamic to be about the relationship with the other characters. I don't think she doesn't exist without the world around her. So no, I'm not any more intimidated than anybody else, I don't think. I'm incredibly grateful to have Rob and Diane creating my my storylines and I trust them implicitly, so that takes a lot of the pressure off too.
What is it like seeing your face on a Comic-Con bag?
It's quite funny because I look so different, I hope, in real life. Touch wood. But so I don't get recognised as that character or anything. I'm much more recognised as Tinkerbell or somebody else, and that's quite fun to have such a strong departure from your character in real life. But it's fun, it's exciting, it's nice to see that people are caring about the show and getting the buzz going.
Exactly, like Once Upon a Time, Masters of Sex, like
am I still right now? At the moment, for the next 6 or 7 months, however long we're shooting, I don't really have time to work on anything else, but my storylines are open on both those shows, so both the showrunners have been incredibly warm about wanting it to come back at some stage, so hopefully we can do that, because those are both shows that I've had a great time on as well.
You've already kind of done a lot of shows in which people can dress up like your character. Have you seen anybody walking around as you so far?
As Liv Moore from iZombie. I've seen a couple of Tinkerbells, but I haven't seen.
I saw one actually.
An iZombie. You didn't.
I did.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, the comic book has such a great fan following anyway our character that we developed, I feel like does have a very strong resemblance to the comic book. So hopefully we can kind of see some of that crossover in the costumes too.
What do you admire about her? You're a female lead in a series, so it's kind of really great to have that. You've got her co-creator, that's when you look at her in her 20s, kind of real life crisis kind of thing, what do you like about what she's kind of struggling through, that she's able to see some hope? Do you feel like she's only like hope or
Absolutely. I think anybody who comes out of school, and I mean she's come out of her medical training, and suddenly she doesn't have that framework, which I come out of high school and I'm no longer able to just answer I'm a student, and I'm no longer able to say I live in Titirangi and this is my world. It's now how do you find that, and I think it's a very human and accessible story. It just so happens that hers is magnified by the fact that she's also lost her life, and she the things that you struggle with connections with your family and trying to decide where you want to live, and do you want to still engage with the school friends that you had. There's all those things that we go through, and I think it's kind of just a heightened experience of that. And interestingly, my best friend in New Zealand is a forensic psychologist, and she was talking to me about, she's doing her thesis at the moment on murder victims' families and what happens to the healing process when they find some sense of meaning and some sense of purpose, or write a book about the experience, or are able to place some of their identity in that process. And I think Liv has that very much once she realises in the first episode that she is able to actually help bring justice to people who've died and help solve the crime and find the killer. She gets a bit of a sense of identity in that all, and I think, I treat it as a heightened quarter-life crisis.
How challenging was it getting zombie mannerisms down? Do you have a walk that you had to kind of practice, or sounds?
Yes, actually. It was incredibly challenging in thinking about it in the weeks leading up to shooting, but luckily the first time that I actually had to play zombie was the middle of the night. We were shooting in the cold in Canada, in the woods. I'd been clinging to the roof of the car. My brain was mush. I wasn't really thinking at all, and it was a relief because stuff just happened, and I had no inhibitions, and I just played around and managed to find something that I think worked. Sometimes that happens easier when you have a lot of adrenaline than when you're getting too heady about it. So we had fun that first night, and then we'll have fun riffing on that, I think, throughout the show. Thank you so much.